Picture a high-stakes courtroom drama.
Oh, I love a good trial.
Right. But the prosecutor in this one is the Roman god Mercury.
Okay, setting the scene.
And the defendant is humanity itself. But the plaintiff taking the stand, the one demanding absolute justice, is Mother Earth. And she is furious.
She's had enough.
Yeah. She accuses humans of parricide, basically.
Yeah.
Of greedily boring into her veins by torchlight, carrying out her insides, just to hoard silver and gold.
That is quite the visual.
It is. And humanity tries to defend itself, arguing that, Earth is this covetous stepmother hiding the wealth we actually need to survive.
Wow.
So it's this tense, bitter trial over environmental destruction, resource extraction, and, well, human greed.
Which sounds exactly like a modern allegorical play, right? Like something written yesterday about climate change or corporate mining.
Right. But it isn't modern. This is actually a text called Iudicium Iovis.
Which was written by Paul Schneevogel, I think?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A scholar in the 1490s. And that completely shatters the assumption we usually have about this specific period of history.
It really does.
Because, when you picture the Middle Ages, you probably imagine this very specific filter over everything. Grayscale, constant rain, mud.
Yeah, the classic Dark Ages aesthetic.
Exactly.
Just terrified peasants hiding in hovels, throwing leeches at literally every problem, and completely at the mercy of this hostile wilderness.
Right. There's this lingering myth that it was a miserable era of just, pure ignorance, where people endured nature without ever actually thinking about it.
But when you look at the texts they actually left behind, that grayscale filter completely vanishes.
It just disappears.
You find yourself looking at a world bursting with complex science, fierce philosophical debates, and an environmental mindset that was, quite frankly, remarkably sophisticated.
And that is the mission of this deep dive. For you listening right now, we're going to unpack a stack of fascinating sources.
Some really great stuff in here.
Yeah, we've got John Aberth's comprehensive book, An Environmental History of the Middle Ages, along with medieval journey, literature, scientific encyclopedias, and even Islamic medical and astrological texts.
We're covering a lot of ground today.
We really are. We're going to track how the medieval relationship with nature evolved over time. We'll watch it shift from adversarial fear to an incredibly confident, collaborative era.
Which is wild to think about.
Totally. And eventually into a nuanced, what they call new ecology brought on by severe climate change and devastating pandemics.
It's a journey that feels incredibly relevant to anyone listening because their struggles eerily mirror our own modern crises.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, to understand how medieval people viewed the dirt they were standing on, we can't use a modern map.
No, we have to look at their cosmic architecture.
Right, because they didn't see the solar system the way we do, with the sun at the center.
No, they operated on the geocentric cosmos, specifically the Ptolemaic system.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. The best way I can wrap my head around it is to imagine a massive cosmic nesting doll.
That is a perfect visualization. You have spheres nested inside of spheres.
Right. But in this nesting doll, the Earth isn't some privileged, beautiful blue marble floating in the center of a vast universe. The Earth is the dense, heavy pit at the very core.
The absolute bottom.
Yeah, and it's surrounded by layers of the four elements. You have the Earth itself in the center, surrounded by a sphere of water, then a sphere of air, and then a sphere of fire.
Right, and those four elemental spheres make up what they call the sublunary world, basically everything below the moon.
Okay.
Then outside of that fire layer, you hit the planetary spheres. The moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn.
So the Earth is literally at the bottom of everything, like the drain.
Exactly, like the grain. And that spatial arrangement carried immense physical and moral weight.
How so?
Well, in medieval physics, heavy things naturally fall toward the center of the universe. Earth and water are heavy, so they sink. Air and fire are light, so they rise.
Makes sense.
Because the Earth was the absolute bottom of the universe, it was considered dark, heavy, and subject to constant change, corruption, and decay.
Wow.
It was literally the cosmic sink where all the heavy, impure matter settled.
So if the Earth is the decaying sink at the bottom, what did they think was going on up in the planetary spheres?
Well, everything above the moon was made of a completely different substance. They often called it the ether.
Right, the fifth element. Yeah.
Yes. It was divine, perfect, and imperishable. It never decayed. In fact, medieval scholars believed that the spinning of these massive crystalline planetary spheres was so perfect that it created a literal divine harmony.
Oh, the music of the spheres.
Exactly, the music of the spheres.
But human ears were considered far too mortal and corrupt to actually hear it, right?
Correct. We just weren't tuned to that divine frequency. And this physical structure perfectly mirrored their biological and spiritual hierarchy,
Okay.
a concept known as the Great Chain of Being.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it was a strict vertical ladder of existence. At the very top, you have God. Below that are the angels, which were understood as pure, unchangeable spirit without any physical bodies.
Right.
Below the angels are humans, then animals, then plants, and finally at the very bottom, the minerals of the earth, which are pure, dense matter without any spirit at all.
Okay, wait. If humans genuinely believed they were living in the cosmic garbage dump of the universe, just surrounded by decay, how did this physical map dictate their spiritual view of themselves? Like, where do we fit in emotionally?
What's fascinating here is that humans occupied a completely unique, highly tense middle ground.
Tense how?
We were considered the only beings in the entire universe made of both spirit and matter.
Oh, interesting.
We have eternal souls, like the angels, but we're weighed down by heavy, decaying physical bodies, like the animals and minerals. We were the bridge between the divine and the corrupted.
Which perfectly explains a recurring theme in the sources we looked at.
Yes.
There's a whole genre of medieval journey literature where authors actively try to navigate this tension.
Yes, exactly. Writers like Boethius or Dante or Lucan, they heavily featured characters or souls ascending through these planetary spheres.
It's almost like, well, it's like standing at the very top of a massive cathedral and looking down at the muddy, crowded street below. Suddenly the chaos down there just doesn't seem that important.
That is the exact psychological effect they were aiming for.
Really?
Yeah. By looking down from the divine heavens, they could see the earth for what it actually was, a tiny, insignificant point.
Right.
From up there, human dictators, massive armies, earthly desires, they all looked totally trivial. It was a literary device designed to teach a moral lesson.
That your true home is in the divine heavens, not down in the heavy, decaying dirt.
Exactly. You were supposed to transcend your material surrounding.
Okay, but practically speaking, people couldn't just transcend the dirt on a Tuesday.
No, obviously not.
They still had to grow wheat and survive the winter. So, knowing that they viewed the Earth as this heavy base center of the universe, how did that translate into their daily interaction with the wild nature around them? Did they just resent the environment?
Well, their attitude wasn't static. It shifted drastically. And what is fascinating is that their philosophy evolved in direct response to real-world climate changes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the early Middle Ages, roughly the 6th to the 10th centuries, the attitude was predominantly pessimistic and adversarial.
That makes sense. I mean, you read early medieval literature, like Beowulf, and nature isn't some serene park.
Far from it.
It's a hostile, terrifying force. The wilderness is literally represented by demonic entities like Grendel lurking in the fens and the moors, just waiting to rip you apart the moment you step outside the safety of the mead hall.
Right. In that era, humanity existed in these isolated population pockets surrounded by massive, untamed forests and swamps. Nature was an adversary to be feared, beaten back, and, if possible, conquered just to survive. But then, the climate shifted. We enter a period climatologists call the medieval warm period, running roughly from 900 to 1300 CE.
And global temperatures rose significantly.
They did.
The impact of that warming is actually staggering when you look at the historical record. The sources point out that the Vikings were able to colonize Greenland purely because the sea ice retreated enough to allow it.
Exactly.
And in places like England and Germany, farmers were successfully growing vineyards at elevations up to 780 meters above sea level.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, that is practically impossible in those regions today.
The weather became incredibly cooperative, and when the earth suddenly yields an abundance of food, when the brutal winters recede and the growing seasons extend, human psychology changes.
I bet.
This climate boom led to an era of what environmental historians call ecological triumphalism.
Ecological triumphalism. I love that term.
The adversarial fear of the dark woods just melted away, replaced by a highly collaborative, completely dominant mindset.
See, wait, so they weren't just terrified peasants hiding from wolves anymore?
Not at all.
They actually believed they were actively upgrading God's creation. I have a hard time buying that. I mean, weren't they still incredibly vulnerable to the elements?
Of course they were, but you have to look at the theology that drove them. Yes, they were vulnerable, but the abundance of the warm period convinced them that they had a divine mandate to actively manage the earth.
Okay.
They began to see themselves as God's partners in creation. You had massive orders of Cistercian monks who made it their holy mission to drain swamps, clear wild forests, and build these highly efficient agricultural estates.
Wow.
They didn't view chopping down a forest as environmental destruction. They saw it as bringing wholly rational order to wild chaos.
The sources mention a 12th century writer, Bernard Sylvester, who really captures this shift.
Oh, yes.
He portrayed man as the high priest of creation.
That's a bold title.
Right. His argument was essentially that God provides the raw, unrefined materials, but it is humanity's divine job to improve upon them. Like, nature gives us raw milk, but human ingenuity creates cheese.
A clear upgrade.
Totally.
Yeah.
Nature gives us animal hide, and we make shoes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals something profound about the human condition. When the weather was good and harvests were plentiful, medieval people believed humans and nature were existing in a perfect, divinely ordained harmony.
Okay.
They believed they were fulfilling their role in the great chain of being by elevating the raw matter of the earth.
But weather isn't permanent.
No, it is not.
Human confidence eventually collides with natural reality, and the prosperity of the warm period came to a crashing halt.
The climate roller coaster plunged downward. The medieval warm period ended, driven by periods of low solar activity known as the Wolf and Maunder minimums.
Okay.
This launched Europe into what we now call the Little Ice Age. And the environmental blowback was, frankly, apocalyptic.
Apocalyptic is the right word. The sources outline a cascade of absolute nightmares. First, you have the Great Famine from 1315 to 1322.
Terrible time.
It wasn't just brutally cold, the precipitation was relentless. Massive, unending rains flooded the fields, literally rotting the seed crops in the mud before they could even germinate.
Millions of people starved to death.
And then, while Europe is still reeling from that trauma, the Black Death arrives in 1348.
Wiping out anywhere from a third to half the population of Europe and the Middle East.
Which is just unimaginable.
Absolutely. These late medieval crises completely shattered the arrogance and optimism of the previous centuries. And this is exactly where we see the birth of a new ecology.
What does that mean exactly?
It was a cyclical, far more nuanced view of the environment. Nature was no longer just passive raw material waiting to be turned into cheese and shoes. It was an active participant, fully capable of waging war on humanity.
Which brings us right back to that courtroom drama we started with, the trial of humanity.
Exactly. Or look at the Italian writer Gabriele de Mussis. In his Chronicle of the Black Death, the Historia de Morbo, he doesn't just say, "Oh, God sent a plague." He writes a literal dialogue where God looks down at a polluted, exhausted earth filled with the violence and filth of human sinners, and God commands the earth to exercise vengeance.
Whoa.
And the earth replies that she will open her veins, swallow up the criminals, and completely deny humanity her fruits.
So when they faced these massive disasters, years of rain, unprecedented plagues, did the general population just throw up their hands and blame demons or magic? Because that's the stereotype.
Right, but no, and this is a crucial misconception. The scientific minds of the day actively pushed back against purely supernatural explanations.
Really?
Yes. Scholars at the University of Paris, like Nicole Oresme and Jean Buridan, openly mocked those who blamed weird weather or disease purely on miracles or magic.
Good for them.
They urged the public and the medical community to find the actual natural causes in the physical environment.
And according to the texts, a lot of that sophisticated environmental science was coming from Islamic medical giants, right?
Yeah.
Like Avicenna and Haile Abbas.
Yes, these scholars developed and refined what became known as the miasma theory. This was the predominant medical explanation for epidemics, and it was deeply tied to the environment.
Okay.
The theory proposed that diseases were caused by corrupt, putrefied air.
But how did they think the air got corrupted in the first place? What was the actual mechanism?
Well, they looked for specific environmental pollutants. Avicenna pointed out that miasma could be generated by rotting battlefields left unburied or stagnant, putrid water in swamps.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. They also believed there was a synergistic interaction between celestial events, like a specific planetary alignment, and terrestrial conditions.
Okay, so astrology meets epidemiology.
Exactly. The heat of certain planets could cause the stagnant swamps to release noxious vapors. When a human breathed this corrupt air, the miasma would travel to the heart, corrupt the vital spirits of the body, and cause a pestilential fever.
Honestly, it is a highly rational, internally consistent medical theory based on observation. They were observing that people living near swamps or poor sanitation got sick faster.
They were connecting the dots. But here's the linchpin of the medieval mindset. While they aggressively look for natural scientific vectors for disease like polluted water or putrefied air, they firmly believed that human moral failings were the ultimate trigger.
Oh, I see.
In their worldview, ethical pollution caused physical pollution. Human sin caused the natural environment to become toxic, which then set those scientific mechanisms of disease into motion.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you, the modern listener. We think of eco-anxiety and debates about human greed causing environmental blowback as these very modern phenomena. But the medievals were having the exact same trial of humanity debate over mining and pollution.
They really were.
It's an incredibly interconnected universe. Every action has a reaction, physically and spiritually. And this belief in deep interconnectedness didn't stop at global events like famines or plagues. The medieval mind believed that the exact same celestial forces that cause massive climate shifts also literally built human beings in the womb.
Yes, this is where we have to zoom in from the macrocosm, the universe, to the microcosm, the human body.
Okay, let's do it.
To understand this, we turn again to the Islamic medical and astrological texts written by scholars like Abu Mashar and Pseudo-Apollonius. They took Aristotle's ancient theories of universal generation and applied them directly to human conception.
Okay, let me see if I can translate the Aristotelian physics here for a second. Aristotle believed that for anything to exist, it required different causes.
Right.
The two big ones for reproduction were the efficient cause and the material cause. So if we use an analogy, the efficient cause is like a carpenter.
Okay.
The carpenter provides the motion, the skill, and the energy to build a table. The material cause is the wood. It's the passive stuff that actually gets shaped.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. In the context of medieval biology, they believed the male semen was the efficient cause, the carpenter.
Right.
It didn't provide the physical matter for the baby, but it provided the motion, the vital heat, and the soul. The female menstrual blood was considered the material cause, the wood. It was the passive raw material that would be shaped by the male heat.
Though the sources note that this wasn't universally accepted.
Not at all. It was hotly debated. Medical titans like Galen and later Ibn Sina strongly disagreed with Aristotle's purely passive view of the female contribution.
Interesting.
They argued that because children clearly inherit traits from their mothers, women must also produce a form of active seed or semen, meaning both parties contributed actively to the process.
But regardless of where the material came from, the role of the cosmos in shaping that material is wild. They believed the planets acted as the actualizing agents for the fetus. They took turns governing the pregnancy, month by month, using their specific elemental qualities to build the baby.
The astrological sequence is a perfect example of their mechanical view of nature. Month 1 of the pregnancy belongs to Saturn.
Okay.
In the Ptolemaic system, Saturn is associated with extreme coldness and stillness. This aligns perfectly with the biological need to initially gather and stabilize the fluid material in the womb.
Then in month 2, Saturn hands the project over to Jupiter. Jupiter is hot and moist, bringing the vital heat needed to spark rapid growth and shape the initial internal organs.
Exactly. Month 3 belongs to Mars. Mars represents intense, fiery heat, which medieval doctors believed was mechanically necessary to dry out the soft tissues, harden the bones, and shape the rigid limbs.
Makes sense mechanically.
Right. And this sequence continues smoothly through the planets, each adding their specific elemental quality until you hit the 8th month.
And what happens in month 8?
The cycle actually circles back to Saturn, and this was considered highly dangerous.
Why dangerous?
Because Saturn's elemental nature is cold and still. They believed a baby born prematurely in the 8th month was very likely to die. The theory was that Saturn's set-in extreme coldness would extinguish the baby's vital heat before it was fully prepared for the outside world.
So what does this all mean? It's like the planets are an assembly line of cosmic factory workers. Saturn gathers the parts, Jupiter welds the frame together, Mars hardens the steel. Each planet takes a turn to add a specific attribute before passing the baby down the line.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly, and this raises an important question. Why?
Yeah, why?
Why link the massive, distant stars to something as intimate as a developing womb? It's because, to the medieval mind, the universe was entirely unified.
Oh.
There was no modern separation between physics, biology, theology, and astronomy. The coming to be of a child in the womb was just a microscopic version of the coming to be of the entire universe. As above, so below.
It really puts our modern way of compartmentalizing science into perspective. I mean, we've covered a massive amount of ground
You
today.
really have.
We started at the top of the rigid great chain of being, looking down at the heavy, decaying Earth. We rode the climate roller coaster through the incredibly confident, forest-clearing optimism of the medieval warm period, before crashing into the apocalyptic, famine-soaked environmental blowback of the Little Ice Age.
Quite the ride.
And finally, we zoomed all the way down into the astrological assembly line of human conception.
It's a historical journey that proves the medieval era was anything but a stagnant, muddy, dark age. These were people who were constantly observing, theorizing, and adapting to a highly dynamic environment.
And it's a powerful reminder for you listening right now. Our current anxieties about climate change, extreme weather, pollution, and global pandemics are not entirely new.
No, they're really not.
The medievals wrestled with the exact same questions about humanity's footprint on the Earth and whether our ethical and physical actions were pushing the natural world to strike back.
They understood, perhaps better than we do sometimes, that humanity and nature are locked in a continuous high-stakes dialogue.
Exactly. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one last fact from these sources to mull over.
Oh, this is a good one.
We usually assume that medieval people strictly believed in a very young Earth based on a literal 6-day Genesis timeline, right?
Hmm.
We assume any other thought would get you immediately thrown in prison.
That is the standard assumption, yes.
Well, according to historian Ivano Dalpreet's work, that is actually a myth. His research reveals that notions of deep time, the idea of an incredibly ancient or even eternally existing Earth, actually circulated freely in medieval vernacular science and literature.
Wow.
It wasn't seen as heretical at all by religious authorities.
That completely flips the script on how we view their intellectual freedom. The idea of a uniformly anti-science young Earth Middle Ages is largely a later invention.
Right.
It was mostly used to make the thinkers of the Enlightenment look more revolutionary by comparison.
It just goes to show, the next time you picture the Middle Ages, don't just apply that muddy grayscale filter. Because beneath that myth is a remarkably complex world where the stars shaped the unborn, the Earth could literally take you to court, and the universe was one giant, connected, breathing organism.